All right, everyone. Welcome to the next video in Module 1. This is going to be video number 4. Video number 4. Sorry, I was just looking at my notes to make sure because I have one more coming up after this one. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and actually kind of give a basic overview of the Linux file system. It's very important to kind of understand how Linux works in a way. So that way you can better understand how to basically navigate through the entire operating system. Once you have a good understanding of that, then navigating through the operating system is going to be a piece of cake. So let's go and get started with the Linux file system. So if you remember in the previous video and everything, we talked about how to use a couple different commands. We use something called PWD, which stands for either print working directory or present working directory, okay? Then you also have the ls command, which allows you to give you a list of the contents within the actual directory, okay? Then we also talked about how we can maneuver forward and backwards within the operating system. We talked about the cd command or change directory command. And to move forward, we can cd into the directory we want to go to, but we can move backwards as well by doing cd space ... Okay, if you have any questions about that, please go ahead and refer back to video number 3, and you can go over that a little bit more, and you can kind of get the feel for that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this. So we're going to start talking about a couple different things. What I want to go ahead and first start talking about is we're going to let's go ahead and do some new commands. And this is going to be all about new commands for the most part, okay? So I want you to go ahead and just kind of understand that what we're first going to do is there are some really important commands that we need to actually be able to run. And some of these are going to go ahead and be for auditing purposes. Some are going to be not just for auditing purposes, but overall just for us to understand like who we are, if we're working as a system administrator, or if we're working as a tech support, or if we're just doing like pen testing and stuff. We need to make sure we understand who we are. So the first command I'm going to tell you is going to be we need to figure out who we are. So how do we figure that out? Well, it's actually a very simple command. We type, who am I? So I am the student user. And we know that also by looking at this, we say, okay, this is the user, this is the host name, and then this is the current file directory the directory we currently live at. So let's go ahead and actually look at this even more. We can then go ahead and say, do a clear. I'm going to get rid of this. We talked about clear in the last video as well. So let's actually go ahead and start doing the CD. When we talked about CD, let's go ahead and go back 1. And we'll go ahead and we're back in the home directory. And if we're not too sure where we're at, we can do the home directory. We also can do what's something called tree. We can do a tree, and this gives us a actually visual representation of the directory. So notice the dot or the period is the current directory we're in, which is home, okay? Within home, and if you're not too sure how this works, I'm going to clear this out real quick. So we're going to we know we're in the home directory. I'm going to do an ls. So notice I have 2 directories, student and Timmy. I can do a tree, which is very much similar to ls, okay? It's just a little bit different. It gives me a little bit different output. I can do tree, and it gives me a more visual representation of the directory. So within these 2 directories, student and Timmy, in the home directory, the main directory I'm in right now, the present working directory, which is home, there's 2 other directories or folders, one called student, one called Timmy. Within student, all these are there, okay? Within Timmy, it says there's an error opening directory. Well, probably because Timmy either has logged in or there is no Timmy and the directory was never actually deleted, whatever the case may be, okay? There's a lot of reasons why that you'll get that kind of error, but that's for another video. All right, so we did tree, which allows us to go and see this a little bit differently. So let's go ahead and do a clear real quick, and we're going to clear our actual system. Let's actually go ahead and do another CD. And now we talked about this previously in the last video. We talked about this. We're actually in the root directory, which is the where the main operating system sits, the root folder, okay? We can do a PWD, and again, it gives us the root. We can do an ls, and it gives us this right here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and now talk about a couple of different, pieces of this. I'm not going to hit on every one of these because the book goes into that a lot. But I do want to go ahead and actually stress a little bit about like some important folders or directories that you should be familiar with, both as a cybersecurity professional, but also as a administrator, okay? A Linux administrator or a technical support person, or just someone that wants to actually go ahead and use Linux on a daily basis. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. So the first thing I want to go ahead and stress right now is that everything in Linux as a whole is a file. Everything. Every process that you're running, every command you run, every file, every application, every directory, everything, every time you plug in a USB, everything in Linux is a file. So what that means is that we actually have a way to access those files if and only if we have the correct permissions. That'll be covered in later videos, but just know that we can access any and all files if and only if we have the correct permissions. So let's go ahead and look at this. So let's go ahead and talk about these right here as a whole. So we're gonna start here with bin, okay? We're gonna actually go into bin. And bin actually is very interesting. So we're gonna do an ls. Bin is gonna go ahead and actually be the housing for basically binaries. That's what it actually is shortened for binaries. And this is going to go ahead and be like, you can think about it as like it's computer language. So we can see these are the binaries of the commands we're using. So for example, we ran the ls command. So let's see, oh, there it is right there. So we're going to go ahead and actually, let's take a look at that. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take a look at this command and see what it looks like in the actual file itself, because remember, everything in Linux is a file. So I'm going to do a cat ls. And one of the cool things about cat ls is cat stands for concatenate. So concatenate, concatenate. And what this is going to do is go ahead and actually say, we're going to concatenate this, and it's going to print it out to the screen. So let's go ahead and do a cat of the ls command file. Now, this looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, and it is. It's really just a bunch of leet speak that basically the computer understands. So when you run the ls command, this is how it actually knows what you're talking about, okay? So let's go ahead and actually, I'm gonna clear this up a little bit. Cool. So we have something else we can do too. We can actually go ahead and make copies of this as well. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna actually, we're gonna take the actual file, and we're gonna go ahead and actually make a copy of it. So we're going to go ahead and do the ls command. So we're going to actually change it up. We're going to say, we'll do cp, which stands for copy. Okay, that's going to be the new command, cp. We need to go ahead and give the original file. Okay, the original file name is ls. And then we have to give it a new name. And this new name has to be something different and unique. So I'm going to go ahead and call it new list command. Okay, so here's one thing that you need to understand. You may not have permission to do this because, like I said before, with the right permissions, you can access and do anything to the file system. Well, for right now, it's not going to make any sense why we're doing this, but just know that when you actually put this prefix in front of like a command is being run, you're basically asking the operating system for permission. Say, please, can I run this command? So I'm going to put sudo, and I'm going to talk about this later on in the chapter. It'll actually be in module 3 where we talk about sudo. So I'm going to do sudo cp ls, and then this is going to copy the ls command to a new file called new list command. And it's going to ask my password because it's saying, hey, if you want to do this as a user, you need to go ahead and authenticate and make sure that you have permission to do this. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool. So let's go ahead and see what this is. Let's do an ls. So if we do an ls, we should be able to see new list command under the ends, right? And there it is right there, new list command right there. So what this means is that we can actually go ahead, because ls equals the new list command, right? We should actually be able to type in new list command. And there we go. It does the same exact thing, right? That's cool. Now, what we also can do is we can actually go ahead and delete that file. Okay, delete that file. So we're going to do what's called a remove. ls. Okay, so it's write protected. So let's go ahead. So because it's saying it's write protected, more likely we need to ask for permission. So I'm going to do a permit. Please let me go ahead and delete the file. And if we do an ls, no such file or directory. So we deleted the file. The file's gone using the rm, remove rm. Okay. So what does this mean? So that means the file ls is gone. But we do have an actual file that can run the ls. It's called the newlist command, right? There you go. So you can do the same thing. Now let's go ahead and actually fix what we did. So now I'm going to teach you another one. This is actually going to be called the move command, mv. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put this just in front, just in case. Remember, I need to ask for permission first. Please let me go ahead and move this. So what's the difference between copy and move? Copy keeps the original file. Okay. And then creates an alternate file that you specify. Move is basically changing the file that you're mentioning to something else. So a lot of times if you need files renamed, they rename using the move command. So we're going to actually do move new list command. And I'm not going to type it. I just hit the tab key to autocomplete. And we're going to change it back to ls. So now we should go ahead and be able to do an ls. And now it works again. And new list command, as you can see, is gone. New list command is gone. And the ls command is back. Okay. So we just went ahead and did that. I'm going to clear my screen again. And nope. Clear. There we go. Okay. So now let's go ahead and go back. So the next one we talked about bin, but notice there's another one over here called sbin. Okay. Now sbin is actually also another unique basic folder. So sbin, I'm going to change directory into there. I'm going to give it an ls. So all of these actually are going to go ahead and be, these are going to be binaries that the administrator has access to. Okay. So we call this the root user in the Linux world. So if you have root, you have basically all access to it. So these are going to be commands that the root user have access to. And this is going to be things like, you know, getting an ifconfig, getting information about, you know, part X, getting information about NFS, you know, user mod, user add. So being able to add a user, being able to delete a user, being able to modify a user, these are the things that you want an administrator to do. You don't want every user to be able to create users. So these are going to go ahead and correspond to binaries. So you can look for other ones too, like, you know, firewall D. You can look for NFT, no login. So you can kind of see how these actually correspond. And we'll go into some of these throughout the entire semester. So don't worry, these are going to be covered. But for the most part, I think just know that sbin controls the administrative binaries, okay? So I'm going to go back and we're going to do an ls again. So the next one we're going to is going to be the user directory. So we're going to change directory to the user directory. Now, this is interesting because this out here, when you go into the user directory, you're like, wait a second. This almost looks like the root directory. Well, it's not a carbon copy, but it does have some remnants of the root directory in here. So you have, again, you have bin and you have sbin. And what this actually looks at here is these are local binaries. So this is what a local user would be able to run, either in binary or local administrator, okay? And these are the local systems right here. So you can see, and then there's also games. So you can kind of see everything, and we can actually go ahead and go into bin, and we can see that it looks pretty similar to the bin in the root directory. Not much difference. If anything, there's not much at all. So we can go ahead and let's actually go back into, let's do an ls of sbin. Oh, I need to go back one, sorry. Let's do an ls of sbin. So again, the same thing we saw ipconfig, right? ipconfig, there you go. So again, so now the big question is like when I run a command, how do I know when where it's being pulled from? If it's being pulled from the slash user, or if it's being pulled from, is it being pulled from bin or sbin? Or is it being pulled from user bin or user sbin? Well, we have a really cool capability to do that. I'm gonna go back real quick, and let's go ahead and actually we're gonna do a which, okay? Now this command which and everything is basically saying which directory or which actual file path are we using to run this command. So let's go ahead and do a which of the ls. So notice that the ls command is being run from user bin ls. So let's do a which for pwd. Again, user bin pwd. What about which for cd, which we know what cd is? Okay, so we can see that these commands are being run from the user bin cd. They're not being run from the binary directory. They're being run from slash user slash binary. Why is that? Well, probably because I'm logged in as a user. If I was to actually log in as root, which I can, I'm just going to go ahead and show you. Remember, we talked about how you can become root, and basically when you change over this to a hashtag or $, notice that I'm root now, okay? We talked about this a while back. We talked about the terminal. I can now do which of pwd, and user, again, we're back to user bin pwd. So it didn't change much, okay? But what if I was to do which of ifconfig? Because remember, that wasn't in the bin directory, that was in the sbin directory. Ah, look, it's being user bin, user sbin, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and type exit, I'm gonna clear this out, and let's go ahead and do an ls again. So let's go ahead and move on. So this one right here, this one's gonna go ahead and be the, let's see, what am I looking at here? So we have another one. We have the boot directory, and this boot directory is exactly like, it's very obvious. It contains boot files that are necessary for the operating system to boot up, okay? If you go ahead and look next, the next one you should be familiar with is the var directory. And people say variable, it stands for various. It's really a amalgamation of different files, and these files actually happen to be log files. So we can go into there and I can get an ls, and these are all the different log files that are currently active on this machine. So we have log files for here, we have log files for mail, we have log files for database and account, we have log files for logs and targets and spool, that's gonna be your printer stuff. So this is where your log files live, okay? The next one is gonna be the temporary file. This is gonna be temp, okay? So I'm gonna go in there real quick. These are all random temporary files, okay? Now, as a cybersecurity expert, you need to be familiar with the temp file. A skilled hacker is not going to go ahead and write things to disk that's going to be very obvious. We're going to write things that's going to go ahead and not be very obvious. And one of the things that most people don't check is the temp folder. Because why? It's temporary, okay? It's a temp folder. It houses temporary files. So I can write to it, and as long as I either delete from it or I don't delete from it, I don't have to delete from it. I can then go ahead and from there, basically use this information as a playground for me to stay within the system. So knowing that the temp files should be checked and monitored as a cybersecurity professional is very important. But if you're doing things such as pen testing or doing like red teaming, you should also know that this actually is a really good place to live when it comes to placing stuff and like you're trying to go ahead and coexist on a box, because very rarely do people check the temp folder, okay? Let's go back. All right, next. The lib directory, that's libraries. These are shared libraries that are needed by the commands or anything, or by the boots or anything, any of the files. These are shared libraries or anything. And if you go back to when we were talking about the other ones, the sbin, they also have their own library files as well. So just know that. So this is where all your library files are. Then we actually have the /home. Okay, so let's go into let's go ahead and we're going to change directory to home. And remember, this actually lists the home directories for all the users on the box. So there's a student, and then there's a user called Timmy, which we've already been there in the previous in the previous videos. So I'm not going to go ahead and spend too much time on that. But notice one thing, I mentioned this user, this administrator called root, right? But notice that root doesn't actually have a folder in /home. So then where actually is the root folder? Well, surprisingly enough, the root folder actually is in not here. This is not root that we're talking about. We're talking about root, the user root, and it has a separate folder. We can go there and, oh, we don't have permission, but we can ask for permission, right? And we can go ahead and get a list, and notice it looks very similar to the home directory, but this is the home directory for the root user, okay? So then we actually have two other ones we need to talk about. The dev, which is going to go ahead and be referring to devices. This is going to be like your hard drives, your virtual disks, anything of that nature. So any virtual disk or any hard drive space, we can go into there. You can kind of see. So these are all the different hard drive spaces. TTYs is teletype. This is actually like where this also controls people like actually, we don't call it RDP, remote desktop protocol, or remote desktop remoting into a box. We call it SSH. We SSH into a Linux box or a Unix box. So this is where TTY comes into play. We also have like the LPs. This is like for the printers. The SDA1, SDA2, that's going to be your hard drives. And then you have some VGA, that's going to be for like your graphics cards, stuff like that. Okay. All right. Now, let's go ahead and go on to the next one. So the next one is actually going to be I'm going to talk about, is called ETC. So you're actually going to also hear, don't ever refer to it as ETC. It's known as the etc directory. And it sounds like ETSY, but it's just etc, which actually is abbreviation for etc. Etc. is basically when you say etc., 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 it means everything else. This is where everything else goes in there. This is actually going to be our configuration files. So we can do an ls or thing. These are the different configuration files for the different programs are running, or for the different processes. These are the different run levels right here. This has to do with the kernel. This is Bluetooth. This is going to go ahead and be for log rotation. These are going to be configuration of log rotations for services. The shadow, which we'll talk about like in another lecture. So we have this information here for etc, and this is going to have things such as networking. So if I want to look at, remember I said everything's a file, so we can actually go into networks. We're going to go into network manager. So we're going to cd into network manager. Let's see what we got here. Here we go. So we're going to cd into configuration.confd. Nothing in there. Okay, cool. But we can kind of see that we can go ahead and now we can cat the network manager. And this is a file that deals with network management, okay? So everything in this actually is a file. So we can actually go ahead and manipulate it like a file. I'm going to go ahead and back out real quick. Okay. So the last two I'm going to talk about is going to be media and MNT. So media actually is going to go ahead and be for anything that gets auto mounted, such as a USB, stuff like that. If you have like a DVD drive, CD-ROMs, anything that requires auto mounting will be going into the media. And there's nothing in there because I don't have anything mounted that's plugged into this actual virtual machine. Now, the MNT file is a little bit different. Whereas media is meant for auto-mounted devices, MNT is actually if you want to mount it manually. So manual mounting. So that's basically how they're actually used. So there, like I said, we didn't go through all of them, but there is more to go ahead and to know about the operating system. And they actually go about them in the book, as well as also in the PowerPoint. With that being said, that is all I have to go ahead and talk about the Linux file system. We learned a couple new commands in this one. We learned who I am. We learned clear. We learned the command tree. We reviewed some commands. Actually, we learned the command cat. We learned the command CP for copy, RM for remove, and we also learned the command MB for move, okay? So I know it's a lot, but we also reviewed other commands such as PWD, which is print working directory, LS for listing, and then using the change directory command to go forwards and backwards in the operating system, okay? So other than that, oh yeah, and then I forgot, we learned the command which we use to go ahead and identify where is this command being used throughout the actual operating system. So that being said, that's the end of this lecture. There's one more video for this module. It's going to be video number 5, and that's going to be dealing with how to get help within the operating system. Once you kind of understand that, you will have a really good understanding of how you can go ahead and get help to be able to do any command you need to do within the actual operating system. So with that being said, that's the end of this video. Go ahead and check out the next one, and then I'll go ahead and talk about what's going to be expected of you for the end of this module. All right, see you in the next video.